What is brain health? It's quite the loaded question. Something that I spend probably too much time thinking about, and I don't think I have one concrete answer, but I have a few answers, and hopefully they suffice. When I look at brain health, for me, it's really about efficiency. You've got, 85 billion or so neurons. There's literally trillions of connections in there. You've got supporting cells. Then you've got cells that are remodeling neurons. Then you've got cells that are helping get rid of neurons and build new neurons. And there's a very constant dynamic process that's occurring in the brain. I think oftentimes we get confused and think that the brain is this one solid thing that stays static in time, and it's constantly moving. It's constantly remodeling. And when it comes to efficiency, it really means three things. It really means a brain that can utilize blood flow and oxygen, because that's what's coming in there to be able to nourish the brain. It's about being able to use glucose. So glucose, which is like sugar, is something that has to be used by the neurons, by the brain cells, to be able to perform the multitude of activities that it's doing on a daily and minute by minute, sort of second by second basis. And the third would be kind of going beyond, I think science still is guilty, and maybe even science media, maybe even more so, guilty of thinking that the brain operates in a very sort of modular way, so that this is the language center, this is the thinking center, this is the visual center, and this is the motor center. And while undoubtedly it's true that there are areas that exist for certain types of things like that, when you look at what the brain's doing, when you put a patient in the scanner, when you look at the science, it's much more dynamic than that. It's about this beautifully orchestrated flow of neurons. So it's like listening to an amazing symphony and watching and hearing all the different sections come together in an amazing way. And that's the sort of harmony that's created when you have a certain level of efficiency. So it boils down to the dynamic interplay of those three components. And they all kind of work together in flywheel type fashion. So you have the blood flow, which is bringing oxygen. And then when you have that, you have these neurons that are also going to be using glucose to be able to pull in the work, to be able to then extract the oxygen. So you have these neurons that are performing this amazing little process called the oxygen extraction fraction. The neurons are literally working to kind of go into the closet to be able to pull this stuff out and back into where it needs to perform that active cognition, or to be able to say that word, or be able to think about what this person has just told you. And then on the third level, it's like none of this thing happens independently. You need this area to be able to connect to this area and this area and that area over here. And one of the things that we see across the board is that there's no one pattern for like, oh, I say the word cat and I'm going to just see one pattern. What cat means to you versus Brent over here versus me can be three different things. So you're going to see three different patterns of neurological activity. But the basis in terms of how well that activity is firing, how well those three dynamics are at play, usually will show a healthy sort of brain. So when we look at an unhealthy brain, which is sometimes easier to describe, it's the dysregulation of those components. It's like, oh, maybe they don't have good blood flow because of a previous injury. Maybe they don't have good glucose utilization because they're pre-diabetic, or they're a child from an adverse childhood experience, and they're now dysregulated in terms of their insulin production because they don't have access to certain levels of food. And so that the neurons don't use glucose the way that they should. So sometimes we think we focus on just the behavior. We want to focus and say, well, this kid's not behaving well in school, or this person isn't doing this particularly well, but we kind of have lost the underlying biology of what are the things happening that make those behaviors. And so I truly feel like, the brain is what generates behavior, the brain is what generates mind, and you need a healthy brain to be able to do so.